What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS live stream for round 3 of the Zozo Championship. Gonna make sure you know everything you need to, both for PGA DFS and for props, to go out there and have yourself a moving day. Of course, guys, it's only Friday over here in the US. A little bit strange with the time zone difference, but hopefully everyone is having a fantastic Friday and has some fun plans for this evening outside of just watching some of the golf. So I'll be out there with a few buddies, kicking it at a few bars, watching the golf, and hopefully finding yourselves towards the top of some GPPs and hopefully cashing out in some GPPs some prop slips as well. So we'll go through what you need to know. First off, from the weather perspective, we're going to take a look at the golf course and conditions that we'll see today. And then afterwards, going to talk some fantasy strategy. And then at the end, we'll go through both underdog and prize picks and give you a few of my top props to keep an eye on. So we'll start it off with a look at the weather, which for round 3 is going to be a whole lot different than round 2, right? Round 2 was a little bit of carnage out there with the wind, but for round 3, it looks next to ideal. Now, a few of the different models are calling for some AM wind. So from like 8 until 10 a.m., calling for like 9-10 mile an hour winds, which really isn't all that much to worry about. But outside of that, right, it drops down to like 3, or honestly like 3 to even 1 mile an hour per some of the models for the rest of the day. So you can see on the ECM model here, pretty calm throughout the entire day. GFS model, you can see a little bit more AM wind, but once again, it calms down and gets perfect there for the rest of the day. The Icon model, even calmer than the first two. And then this Medio Blue model, the last one, is the calmest of all 4. So pretty much all of them agree that it's going to be much, much calmer than what we saw in round 2. Where there might be a little bit of a mix-up is with the AM hours. You can see over here for Medio Blue, they have some rain coming through from 7 to 9 a.m. This Icon model has a little bit of rain coming through as well. And same thing with the GFS. So we'll have to keep an eye on if that actually comes through, because it's supposed to be raining right now, if anything, over there in Chiba, Japan. And if that's the case, it's going to play even easier here for moving day, right? That would just make the greens even more receptive than they already are. You're going to have much lower winds out there for today. And typically moving day is also when we see some of the easiest pins, right? We see a few tee boxes moved up, right, on most moving days. So rather than this 2.45 over par scoring average, I think we're going to see even better than this round 1 average of 0.35 under. If I had to put a measure on it, right, yesterday, I thought it might play like a stroke over par, right? Maybe like a stroke and a half. Actually played even harder than what I was expecting. I'd guess right around 1 stroke under par. Now, with the caveat being that if they make the pins, if they move up the tee boxes to make this place even easier, it might play like a stroke and a half, maybe even 2 strokes under par. That's how ideal the wind conditions will be. It'll be pretty much still out there from noon onwards. And when you give players overcast conditions, receptive greens, and then on top of that, no wind. I mean, even on the most difficult of golf courses, like an Augusta National, right? I mean, they'll shoot to like a 2 under par average there, let alone out here at like Narashino Country Club that has plenty of short par 4s. So it's not the easiest golf course, but we have seen scoring averages around here of like 1.6, even like 2.2 under par from time to time. And I know there hasn't been a ton of rain or anything, but given the wind conditions, it might be that kind of day. So if you're going to try and find like a quote unquote wave to attack, that's not going to be a thing, right? It's Saturday Showdown. And they're also going off of threesomes off of both tees. So that kind of takes that away. But maybe some of the early tee times, right? And by the early tee times, that would be the middle of the leaderboard. So guys that are close to like 35th, the 38th place will be some of the first guys off. So I know Nikolai Hogard's one of the first tee times. That's one of the reasons that I like him a little bit more for this kind of slate. But outside of some of those little micro edges that you might be able to find, there's not going to be a huge weather edge to be had, right? Just more important from, knowing that there's going to be more ceiling rounds out there, more rounds of like 5-6 under. Bo Hostler yesterday was the one low score that we saw. Today, you're going to see probably 10 to 15 guys, right? Take it to 4 or 5 under par. So making sure that you can get 6 of those players in your lineup is how you can take down a large field contest. So with that being said, hopping into the DFS angle, how are we going to get those 6 players in a lineup, right? And what is the best and most efficient way of building those lineups? And as per usual, with a moving day slate, a lot of it comes down to ownership, right? Round 2 Showdown is very similar to round 3, where you see a lot of the guys that performed well the day before, right, getting a lot of that ownership steam. And while sometimes it's warranted, like a Xander Schauffele, for example, right, was able to go out there and shoot under par in those 40-mile-an-hour winds, right, he's deserving of being like 28% owned. In fact, he's one piece of chalk, right, that I'm still getting to. But outside of that, my entire player pool, right, the rest of the like 18 players that I'm taking here for today, in my, I think, 55 lineups I ended on by the end of the slate, are all guys that are starting relatively early, right? Some of them pretty far behind the 8 ball, because when you're talking about a single round sample, first off, golf is random. But on top of that, for round 3 Showdown, and especially in a no-cut event, this is even more so the case for like this week, where there's a lot of guys that are way behind that would normally not be playing the weekend. Those players have nothing to lose. Like the guys that are +4 or worse, I would say even like +2 or worse on the leaderboard, quite literally have nothing to lose, right? They're guaranteed a paycheck at the end of the week. They realistically, right, are losing like $5,000 to $10,000, right, for every shot they move down the leaderboard. So for them, it's all about going out there and making birdies, right? They're going to be extremely aggressive, and we know like the Sahiths, the Hogard, right, at +2, I think is like a perfect example. One of the first tee times out of somebody who's not going to give two shits today and is quite literally going to try to make as many birdies as possible. And when we're trying to construct the optimal GPP lineup, right, you want as many of these guys as possible, right? The guys that are first off at a spot where they don't care, but in a good way, right? It's not don't care in a bad way, right? If they're like +8 right now, if they're like in last place, like Garrick Higo, who withdrew, that's another story, right? I'm talking about the guys that aren't in contention, right? They don't feel like they have something to lose, that can go out there and freewheel it today, right? Like a Hogard, like a Keith Mitchell at even par, right? You could say the same thing about Sahith, right? Like a top 10, a top 20 means nothing to Sahith, right? He's going for that top 5 or that win this week. So these kind of players that just are in a position to attack today are how you're going to get to the optimal lineup, because we know there's 5-6 under par rounds out there. You're going to see that today. I guarantee you there's at least 5-6 of them out there of people that shoot 64, 65 today. You're going to have those guys in lineups. And the players that are most likely to get there, right, are the ones that are going to take aim at pins, right, that are going to take the chances. And sure, they're a little bit volatile. Like Sahith, we know he's volatile, right? He could throw out a 73, a 74 every once in a while, but he's also capable of breaking the slate, right, shooting 7-8 under par. So I like those volatile kind of players, especially the ones that are at the perfect spot of the leaderboard. So though the winds, right, we just looked at some of the different forecasts, the winds look a little bit higher early on. I've looked at my forecast weather app. I've looked at some of the local forecasts in terms of their projections. All of them are calling for 3-4 miles an hour of sustained winds, pretty much up until like 10 a.m. So I don't know if I buy some of those forecasts. I think it'll be pretty calm early on, especially with the receptive greens. I think that they're going to play to an easier golf course than the quote unquote guys going off later, right? But just remember, right, there's no waves, right? It's threesomes off of both tees. So you're talking about a micro edge, if anything. But like for some of the first groups off, right, like a Hogard, I think that's at least a little bit of an advantage, right? Maybe a good way to like break a tiebreaker if that's something that you're worrying about. We'll go through some of the players I have highlighted on here. Of course, also the ownership tab is completely free here for the round 3 stream. But if you have any questions about a specific player, especially somebody that's maybe not highlighted on the sheet, just go ahead, let me know. Maybe you want to know if I'm getting exposure there, or just my thoughts in general on their chances. Go ahead, throw it down in chat, and we'll get on after it. But let's see. We have a few comments. We got Tyler who says, golf is all about bounce backs. But Eric Cole is -4 versus Hubbard at +6. Yeah, that's definitely a mismatch. Hubbard has a poor course history, but he'll be freewheeling. Yeah, so I'd say the plus EV play, right, is definitely Eric Cole, right? In form, probably just a better player, right? You could argue that for sure. But on top of that, you have a player in Hubbard that's going to be very so hit or miss, right? If he starts, 1-2 over par, there's first 5 or 6, he's going to lose interest rather quickly. But on the, other end of that, if he starts, 1-2 under through his first 5 or 6, he's going to be taking aim at every pin, right? He's not going to hold back. Whereas Eric Cole, if he starts 2 under, right? I mean, that's going to be what, -6 at that point. He's going to be at least, 1, maybe 2 shots off the lead. He might be a little bit more careful, right? He might, kind of take a step off the pedal, take a little bit more conservative approach. Whereas somebody like Hubbard is not going to care, right? He's still going to play like an unconscious MF. So that's why, at least for DFS, right? I like the guys that are going to kind of take that attitude, because if you're going to shoot 5-6 under, right, you've got to be aggressive. But for a head-to-head bet, right, like what you're going with, Tyler, you definitely with the Eric Cole side, right? I mean, it could go sideways for Mark Hubbard real quickly. Eric Cole's probably just the better player. So it's, different based on the format that you're entering. One of them has more upside. One of them's a lot safer, right? So in your case, you want the safer bet. Thanks for the content, of course, watching from the beginning. Yeah, just let me know if you have any questions. You threw Kodaira, I should say, and Inamori into lineups. Any chance they'll stay up the leaderboard? Always. Yeah, especially Kodaira, right? A legit tour player. Inamori, probably a little bit more risky because he's not an elite level player that we see all the time. But you saw players like, was it Nakajima, right? Finished T12 last year. You had a few other players that finished in the top 20 that were on the Japan tour. It happens every time out, right? So I wouldn't expect like a top 5 to top 10, but they can hold their own, right? You've seen it before. So yeah, for sure, Jennifer. And good picks, right? Especially Kodaira. I almost played Kodaira this week, but it was one of my first few out. So props off to you for going out there and actually playing them. So let's go through a few players I want to highlight here. Again, if you have anyone you want me to add on to, just let me know. But Xander Schauffele is a piece of chalk that I'm playing, mostly because of the course history, but also, I mean, the guy shot under par yesterday in some of the windiest conditions imaginable. So imagine if he was out there playing in, conditions like we'll see today, probably would have shot like 6-7 under par. But on top of that, early in his round, right, they had a little bit of the coverage on. They showed some highlights from Xander Schauffele. The guy had like a 10 to 15 foot put for, 10 to 15 footer for a birdie. I think his first 6 holes, and he missed every single one. 4 of them lipped out. They showed the highlight package at the beginning of their coverage, and I felt the frustration for him. I mean, by the time he was missing on hole 5 and 6, he was shaking his head. And a few of them were like left like 2 inches short, like in the center of the hole. He's going to start to make those putts, right? Like Xander Schauffele is a good putter, right? Sometimes the things, the breaks don't go your way, right? You lip out, you leave them 2 inches short, whatever the case may be. Today might be the day they all end up going in. And the ball striking, right, the more important part, the more consistent part that we can count on was there in bunches. I mean, the guy was most likely the best ball striker in the field yesterday. He made nothing. He still shot under par in a 2.5 over par scoring average, right? I mean, he gained 3.5 strokes to the field without a putter, right? With pretty much everything going the opposite way when it came to the greens. So I like that for Xander. Obviously was huge on him going into the week. Took him as an outright bet, and I would not be surprised to see him as the 54-hole leader after today. That's my hot take of the day. A few guys down here in the 9-8K range that we mentioned before, Sahith Theegala, Hogard, and Mitchell are way more prototypical of what I'm targeting for today. Right? I'm looking for guys that frankly don't give a shit when it comes to their score, and guys that are high pedigree players, that are aggressive birdie or better percentage type of players. Theegala checks all of those boxes. Hogard checks all of those boxes. And maybe Keith Mitchell checks most of them, right? Maybe not the highest pedigree player, right? He's very inconsistent, but he is, first off, not going to give a shit. But second off, extremely aggressive, right? A high birdie percentage type of player. So he's getting some ownership, right? 11.9%, but it's not the donkey chalk of like a Bo Hostler at 25%, and a Griot who's 17% owned. And I know, right, Xander Schauffele is getting some ownership, but if you're going to take a chalky player, right, make it a Xander, right? Make it a Colin Morikawa, right, who's an elite tier player in this field. Maybe make it a Keegan Bradley, right, who I'm not playing for today, just for full transparency, but you could play him if you wanted to as chalk. given he's the past champion, right, is in form over the first few rounds. I'd much rather do it with one of these top-end options than Bo Hostler, who I honestly think is an imposter, right? He's I would say an above average tour player. He's pretty solid. I don't think he's going to end up winning this week. And for the fact that he's like the second highest owned player on the slate is crazy to me at $8,700. I talked trash on him going into the week. Obviously, I've had to bite my tongue a little bit about that, but it's a long golf tournament, right? He was the leader after the first round last time out. It didn't sniff the lead by Sunday, so we'll see what happens, right? For all the Bo train guys out there, I love Bo. Don't get me wrong; I've played him for a long time, but to act like he's a world killer now, I think is a little bit of a mistake. That's my opinion, at least. Down here in the 7K range, there's some chalky guys like Suh that I think you should probably avoid at all costs. You could throw JJ Spawn into that box too. Like, I'm normally a Spawn guy too. I play him a lot more often than most people. In fact, I'm playing him for props today, which we'll talk about here in just a few minutes. But he's 16% owned, just too highly owned for my liking. Same thing with Joel Damon, right? 12% owned after a pretty shitty day yesterday, which was not great for my Showdown lineups. I played him yesterday, and he sucked the world up, so that was kind of disappointing. Ben Griffin, though, right, going off pretty early, shouldn't care all that much. It's just a better player than the price tag at $7,400. I mean, if he was in contention at this point, he would be up here in the 9K range, right? I mean, he's a better player than Bo Hostler, right? It's not even a contest at this point based on some of the results. So down here, just 5% ownership. Love that sort of guy, right? Akshay Bhatia also being slept on, only 7.7% owned. So it's not like he's unowned, but still, right? It's not out of hand. And he's only $7,200. He's there at even par, right, at a spot where he's going to be aggressive for the day. These are the type of guys I'm getting to. Will Gordon, aggressive birdie maker. Lee Hodges, aggressive birdie maker. That's just better than the price tag. That's all for the plays that I'm going to highlight here in the live stream. But my entire player pool, right, which is posted over there on Patreon, pretty much follows all of this kind of blueprint, right, where it's guys starting relatively early that are high birdie percentage players. That's 99% of my player pool. I mixed in Xander Schauffele as a little piece of chalk, and I think one more piece of chalk in my player pool that I took. Everyone else is at least like moderately owned to low owned in terms of their leverage. Let's see, any questions in terms of a player pool? If not, we're going to talk some props. Thank you for your thoughts, of course. What do I think about Morikawa versus Sanjay for a head-to-head? Sanjay is number one in round 3 scoring, and Kawa's putting scares you for sure. Yeah, I could see Sanjay over Morikawa. First off, I have Sanjay for some props. So I'm definitely backing the ball striking there. Yesterday was able to post more birdies in the field, made 4 birdies, which is really impressive out there in 40-mile-an-hour winds. And then Morikawa sucked, right? So if you're looking at momentum, you have that going your way. You have the Saturday scoring average going your way. And then, yeah, the putting, if that's scaring you, for sure I could see that. Can I talk about the coverage of Zozo? It's boring, too fast. Yeah, I've been watching it a little bit, Jennifer. I've been playing a lot of video games in the background, frankly. I have a couple monitors here, so I just have the golf on the side. So I haven't been listening very much, but yeah, it's been a lot of ads, right? There's been a lot of playing through that I've had to watch. So not my favorite. It's late at night. They don't have the best production crew over there, I would guess. That's probably the reason for that. Keegan plus 1,400 to win. I could see it. Hey, if you don't have an outright already, you could definitely jump on there. I wouldn't hate it, especially 3 strokes back of Bo Hostler. I mean, he's not a world killer, let's say that much. And yeah, I got you, Tyler. All right, let's talk some props. So I've got some stuff to get to, so we're going to keep this as quick as possible. So if you have any questions, make sure to get them in as soon as possible. But your best value right now, when it comes to pricing and all that sort of fun stuff, is not an Underdog. So there are a few props I took on Patreon that you could check out over there. But what we're going to go over here for the live stream is on Prize Picks. So let me bring up Prize Picks, and we'll go through that board because it's a lot more appetizing, because I think it's going to play easy today, right? I think you're going to see a lot of scoring. I think maybe a 1, maybe 1.5 under par scoring average. And if that's going to be the case, right, guys being posted at just 0.5 under is probably a mistake, right? Especially for like JG Spawn, who I think is a really solid play for today. Nikolai Hogard. So this is going to be the slip for the stream here. But like both of these, they're minus 135 over on DraftKings in terms of their odds. So decent, right? If you're a plus EV better, if you're looking at value. But on top of that, if I think it's going to be a 1.5 under par scoring average, both of these players are clearly better than your average player in this field, right? Like significantly, probably like half a stroke to an entire stroke better than your average player in this field. So to have them projected at what I think is worse than the field average, right, is a glaring misprice. So there are quite a few guys at 69.5 that I'm taking both on here and on Underdog. There's one guy I'm taking at 69.5, but even at 68.5, like there are elite tier players, right? I mentioned that I was taking a Sanjay prop, like hint, hint, might be taking that, right, as another prop that I'm using. Just a lot of guys and conditions that look next to ideal for me that I would be targeting on this kind of slate. So that's what I would do for props, right? If you haven't seen the weather conditions, we'll circle back to that so I can show you what we're talking about here. But the winds are night and day difference, right, from what we saw yesterday. Yesterday, there were 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts. It looks like there's going to be next to no sustained winds, right? Drops off to like 3-2 miles an hour by the afternoon. GFS model, low winds. Icon model, even lower winds. And the Meteor Blue model, the lowest winds of all of them. So we'll have to see what actually bears through, which speaking of, I'm going to check the weather app because they have live sensors over there, right? Uses some of the local towers and whatnot. And I found the one that's directly on the golf course. So we can actually look at what's going on there live right now because the event starts in just over an hour. So as of right now, there are 9-mile-an-hour winds. So this model over here that's calling for like 9-mile-an-hour winds is probably pretty accurate, right? It's calling for like 9-10 miles an hour. That is supposed to drop off just after the play starts, right? Just after tee off at like, I think it's 8:30 local time over there. So hopefully that happens, right? Especially if you're taking some of the unders on strokes, but it's a 9-day difference, right? Yesterday, there were 28-mile-an-hour sustained winds and wind gusts in the 30 to 40-mile-an-hour range. Today, your wind gusts might get there into the teens, but more importantly, your sustained winds are going to be pretty much non-existent by the time that everyone's teed off. So go out there, play your weather edge, right? Take a few of the unders on prize picks. And I would avoid Underdog for the most part. Like there's one slip I went with, right? You can check it out on the Patreon if you want to, but it's not even my favorite slip, right? It's okay. It's a decent piece of value that we sniped off. But if you're going to play anything prop-wise right now, it's, at least in my opinion, you'd be best suited to go over there on prize picks and attack that. So that's all we've got for the round 3 stream. I appreciate all the support here in the channel as per usual. Make sure to stay tuned for our round 4 stream tomorrow and like the video on the way out. And let me know if you're watching this on replay, your top prop on the board over there on prize picks or Underdog. I appreciate you guys. Best of luck in those GPPs and with those prop slips. And I'll catch you guys for the stream tomorrow.